Right, let's talk takeaway, and I've got a brilliant drill that I'd love you to try if you struggle with the early part of your golf swing, and so many of you do. It's called the heavy arms takeaway drill. I'm going to go through what that is in a moment, but if you think about the initial move away from the golf ball, that initial move can really make hitting golf shots much more difficult or much easier. If I take, what we maybe consider as a pretty good setup to the golf ball, we've given ourselves a pretty good chance of making a good swing and producing a good shot. But if my takeaway goes wrong right from the get-go, this is a really common move, or maybe the club gets picked up here, straight away we've reduced the chances of us hitting a good shot, and we're in recovery mode from there. So we really need that club and the body to be moving away from the golf ball in a pretty consistent fashion. So the heavy arms takeaway drill is going to help us do that. I'm just going to remove the golf club to begin with. And when I'm doing this with a student in Mapei, I'm going to get them to hold something pretty heavy, but I'm going to do it without, because I appreciate you probably haven't got something heavy to hold. But I'd love you to take a setup around a golf ball. Just imagine you've got yourself a mid-iron. Let your arms just hang from your shoulders. So I'm really feeling that they're completely relaxed and they're just hanging from my shoulders. And I want to imagine I'm holding something pretty heavy. Now, a medicine ball is what I would tend to use if I had one, but something that's pretty heavy. And what I want you to feel is that you're going to try and learn and feel and understand how you would start to get that heavy object to move back and forward. So if it was really heavy, you probably wouldn't be able to do this with your hands and your arms. You probably wouldn't be able to sort of do this kind of movement. You can't move your arms independently. Your arms are just super, super heavy. So what I would try and get you to do is feel how you would start to use your body to swing these arms, which should feel incredibly heavy. So when I'm doing this little exercise, I'm really feeling that both arms are almost, made of lead. They're really heavy. I can't move them independently. But notice what's happening for me to actually create this movement. Look at my knees. A little bit of rotation, a little bit of movement. Look at my hips. Same thing, a little bit of rotation, a little bit of movement. And that's obviously then reflected in what my upper body's doing. When you look from the face on, there's no lateral movement. I'm not sort of swaying, I'm not lifting, I'm not moving my head. I'm just starting to use my knees, my hips, and my torso, and my shoulders to create this movement in my arms. And my arms are just getting moved by those body parts. Now, the part that you can't see is that as I'm doing that, there's a little bit of pressure going between both feet, and I can feel that. And if you're in a position where you could stand up and try this exercise now, I'd love you to do that. And I really think you'll feel that as you make this movement, you're going to feel that weight moving between the feet and that pressure. And how that pressure moves should be in sync with what my arms are doing. As my arms move away, the pressure moves under this foot, and as my arms move forward, it moves under this foot. So once I've got that little motion going, I can start to just increase that a little bit. And what you'll sort of see is that although I haven't got a golf club, this would look like a pretty good takeaway move, where I haven't got any of those, movements that we don't tend to want. If you think about how I started that movement, it was what my body was doing, creating a movement which allowed my arms to move. Many of the issues that you're going to have in your takeaway, and many of the issues that I see in the takeaway, is when the focus goes on the club head. Now, it makes sense, we've got to move that. It's the thing that's got to travel the furthest. It's the thing that we know ultimately has to hit the ball. But when I put my focus on the club head, it's really easy to get static in the body. The body doesn't play as important role. And we think of that club and we start to move the club around behind us, or we start to try and pick it up into the air, and we start to do things that don't help. Once I've done that little heavy arms drill, what I would then do is take a golf club, set it to a ball, raise it up a little bit, and have the same sensation. My arms are incredibly heavy, and I'm going to use my body to start to create this little movement, which should, hopefully, with any luck, resemble a slightly more desirable takeaway. Notice how the club isn't really being moved independently by the hands, but my body is making those same movements that we saw before. Now, at some point, probably around about here, I'm going to have to start engaging my wrists and my forearms. I'm going to need some wrist set, I'm going to need some forearm rotation, which sets the club onto the desired plane. So let me show you what that would look like. We start this movement, we start to feel my arms and the club are incredibly heavy. And then once I've made a couple of these movements, I then start to work the club up onto plane, and we start to get something that looks like this. Notice how I've got rotation through my knees, my hips, my shoulders, and the club is onto a pretty perfect plane. The takeaway, if done correctly, can be quite natural. It can be quite a simple movement, but very often golfers overcomplicate it through movements that don't necessarily need to be there. And then, like I said at the start, it becomes a recovery process. So I'm going to hit a shot here that's going to go some 40 yards, 50 yards. This is how I'd love you to start your practice. And we're just going to do that little exercise. I'm going to take an address. I've got a 7-iron. I'm going to raise it up. I'm going to start these movements, feeling like the arms are heavy and the club's heavy. And then I'm going to work the club up and let the ball get in the way on the way down. So pretty straight, 40 to 50 yards, not a lot of speed, but I'm learning. And if I'm learning, reducing the speed, reducing the distance is massively going to help that. The quicker we go, the further we hit it, the harder it is to learn and feel and sense new movements. Remember, when we're trying to learn a new movement, we've got to understand what we're trying to do, but we've got to create an environment where we can feel that, we can sense and understand what that feels like, because that's what you're then going to take to the golf course. So the heavy arms takeaway drill is brilliant, and I really encourage any of you, out there, if you struggle with your takeaway, to try it, to feel it, to understand it, and try and take some of those simple movements into your golf swing, because effectively the takeaway should be pretty simple. Then we start to introduce the wrists and the arms. So let's go ahead and hit this one to finish. I think if you've got any issues in your takeaway, that drill is really, really going to help.